Hey beauties, welcome back to my channel. As 2020 slowly comes to an end, I'm looking back over the past year at all of the makeup that was released. I recently filmed my luxury makeup fails and regrets video. I'm working on my best of beauty roundup, which is always so much fun. I think that's usually my favorite video of the entire year. But today I will be sharing my entire large eyeshadow palette collection from 2020. Which usually, as a rule of thumb, I stay away from larger palettes. Before 2020, I had maybe 3 or 4. And I know exactly what happened. It was January, February, whenever this Pillow Talk palette came out from Charlotte Tilbury. I picked this up, fell in love, and it opened the floodgates. Most of these I purchased myself. A couple of them were sent over complimentary, but somehow I ended up with 17 large eyeshadow palettes just from this year. So I will be presenting these in order of my least favorite, working my way down to my most favorite palettes. Starting with one of my luxury makeup regrets, here I have the Rose Decadence palette from Mcgrath Labs. And I should just go ahead and say that none of these palettes are bad. None of them are fails. I really enjoy using all of these palettes. It's nearly impossible to rank them. I'm doing my best, but it really isn't a hard, solid ranking. Some of these palettes I just don't really grab, and they feel a bit redundant in my collection now, so I wish I hadn't have spent the money. And that's really the case with this Rose Decadence. I really like this formula. I think it performs really nicely. The colors are really beautiful, especially if you like pinks. I'm not somebody who's sick of pink. It just so happens that I had picked up probably 4 or 5 pink palettes earlier in the year before this came out, so I should have skipped it. I didn't. I got caught up in the hype. You know how Mcgrath Labs just stirs the pot with her marketing. So I was one of the first people on the website, added it to cart and checked out, and I felt so proud. I was so happy with myself. And here I am with this palette that I probably paid $60 for. I think it's $65, but I got the initial 10% off. Once you add tax, I think it's probably free shipping. Either way, $60, and I just don't really grab for this. There's nothing that is so outrageous, out of this world. Overall, still a really nice palette though. Again, I like all of these palettes. There's a reason why they ended up in my collection. If there's something that I don't think I'm gonna like or that I dislike, I don't buy it. This really wasn't easy, but it had to be done. So coming in at 16 is this Makeup by Mario palette. This is the Master Mattes. And the reason this is number 16 is simply because you look at this palette and it's very beautiful, all earth tones inspired by natural skin tones. This is the perfect, natural, everyday palette. It just doesn't really give me anything to be excited about. So as much as this is very user-friendly, very wearable, I never feel that inspired to grab this. I like having a little shimmer. I usually stick to mattes in the crease, but I like to pop some shimmer on my lid, even if I'm just hanging around the house or running errands. If I'm doing my makeup for the day, I like to have a little touch of glam. And this palette is just a bit too matte. He did master the mattes. The formula is nice, it's a bit lighter. What I mean is that you have to really build up the pigment with your brush. So if I were comparing these mattes to, say, Natasha Denona or the Charlotte Tilbury mattes, even Mcgrath Labs, this palette might seem kind of disappointing. I think for makeup artists, this is perfect. I think for beginners in makeup, somebody who's getting their first natural neutral palette, this is perfect. It serves a lot of purposes, but if you love that wow glam, you like to go all out with your makeup, you want fast, easy, super creamy, super pigmented, 0 to 60, this palette might not be right for you. Overall, really beautiful, very wearable, not a huge standout with my collection and not a huge standout within the 2020 palettes. Next up, I have the Nars Extreme Effects eyeshadow palette. I really like this palette as well. It's so difficult to rank. In fact, I named this as one of my favorite fall eyeshadow palettes in my fall favorites video, and I stand by that statement because this is fall in an eyeshadow palette. But I think because of that, I don't really see this as a holiday palette. I don't really see it for spring. Definitely summer, but these colors are so smoky fall. The formula is a little bit trickier to work with, even compared to some of the other Nars eyeshadow palettes. This one was sent to me complimentary. I've played around with it quite a bit, and I always feel really good about the look. I'm always really happy with the way it turns out. These warm tones are just a bit one-dimensional for me. It's unfortunate we don't get a true change of seasons. We don't really have a fall here in Florida, or else I feel like I would have grabbed this more often or more than I did. Now that I have Christmas on the brain, I'm thinking about bright golds, champagnes, shimmery pearl types of shades. I'm still going to keep this close, and I think for anybody who loves warm tones, this is such a yummy, delicious palette. I'm still going to get a ton of use out of it. It's really pretty. Palette 14 out of 17 is the One Size Beauty from Patrick Starr's The Visionary palette. This was also sent to me complimentary. I really like it. It's not really the type of palette that I tend to collect, so this is sort of different from my personal collection. I really like the colors. I think for a first palette from the brand, he did a really great job because you have a lot of neutrals, but then you also have a few pops of color. I don't think I've so much as touched that bright blue. I should probably play around with it and this Rebel Gray, but I find them to be really creamy, really easy to work with, very blendable, and that's why this palette ranks a little bit higher than the Nars and the Makeup by Mario. It's the shadow itself, because packaging-wise, I prefer Makeup by Mario Nars. For a cardboard palette, this isn't half bad. I like the magnetic closure. You get a giant mirror inside, and I think the metallic pink is very pretty. But it is his formula that makes this palette stand out to me, so it had to rank a little bit higher. I think for the price point, the number of shadows you get, it's pretty hard to beat for somebody who's looking for a more inexpensive palette that they can get a ton of use out of that isn't just neutral. They want some playful colors. This is great. Next, I have the YSL Couture Color Clutch 10 eyeshadow palette in the shade Marrakesh. I love this packaging. The packaging bumps this one up for sure, but I really like the texture of these eyeshadows. I think they're really nice. Considering it's all matte, I think they're really creamy, blendable, easy to work with. This color story is a little bit strange. If you like warmer tones, this palette has you covered. If you like cooler tones, there's something here for you as well. I think when you look at them together, it can be a bit confusing. I think the size of the shadows is really nice. This palette didn't get incredible reviews. I think in terms of YSL eyeshadow palettes, this is definitely one of their best. I'm excited about the spring version. I'm not picking up the holiday version, even though it is in this style. It has the red and black animal print. I'm going to wait for the spring Couture Clutch, which looks like this, but light pink. It has pastels and brighter shades. It's kind of similar to the Makeup by Mario formula in that it is a little bit lighter, so it takes a little bit to really work up the colors and make it really bold and bright. I don't mind putting in the work. I think YSL did a really beautiful job, and I'm happy to see them do something fresh with their eyeshadows. It had been a long time coming. They really needed this revamp, so one of the good things from 2020. Better eyeshadows from YSL. The next two eyeshadow palettes are both from Makeup by Mario. Here I have Master Metals and the Master Metallics. Of these two, which I love them both, I would say I like the Master Metals a little bit less, simply because it's a little bit less versatile. I think this palette is very creative. He took the metals that are found in nature, like silver, gold, copper, bronze, he threw in rose gold, and he created this formula that can be used wet or dry, but when you mix in the Master Metal Manipulator, it creates a smudge-proof liquid shadow. Very cool to play around with. You can create liquid eyeliners if you go in with a more detailed brush, straight from the mind of a makeup artist. So I don't know if this is going to have that same appeal to most people who are probably just doing their makeup really fast and then trying to get out the door, or they're doing more minimal makeup. And what's amazing is how incredible these shadows are dry. You don't have to wet them. You don't need the Master Metal Manipulator or any other liquid. You can just use them like normal shadows and they're really incredible. They're pigmented, creamy, and you can mix them, which is the purpose of this tray, so you can create your own custom colors. The Master Metallics palette, on the other hand, is far more versatile and wearable than the Metals palette. It is so vibrant and colorful. This palette is a jewel-toned dream come true. If you love pops of color, this palette is for you. But you still have some earthy tones in there. You have gold, champagne. You have kind of a coppery gold and a bronzy gold. But then you also have a lot of variety. That's what I love about this palette. And I kind of like the idea that you have all of your metallic eyeshadows in one place. That was a common complaint and a criticism of this palette when it first launched. There was some chatter. Some people were upset that Mario separated his mattes and metallics. But when you listen to him explain why he did the things he did with his launch, it does make sense. He's thinking like a makeup artist. You can always pull both palettes out. You can pull this out with any other palette, any other eyeshadow. In fact, if you just want to go in your crease with a bronzer, you can pull this out and it's perfect. Next, I have my little Marc Jacobs Terrific eyeshadow palette that launched for holiday. This I purchased myself because I could not handle the packaging. I thought this mint and the cherries was really unique for holiday, but just very cute. And I had never tried any of the Marc Jacobs eyeshadow palette, so I figured why not? Now I'm very inspired to try even more because I love these eyeshadows. The texture, the blendability, it's so easy to work with. I know it's not going to be for everybody because I heard from a lot of you who said you are sick of pink. These shades down here come off as a cranberry, berry, pinky tone, but you do still have this deeper brown. It's kind of lighter brown, and then these shades down here, pops of color, neutral palette. So I think this palette does have some versatility. Overall, I think for the price, the quality, the packaging, I just really like this. I was very happy with this. I will purchase more from Marc Jacobs. We've reached halfway, so this palette is right in the middle of the collection. This is somewhat new. It's from KVD Vegan Beauty. This palette was sent to me complimentary. Does it have a name? It's the Edge of Reality eyeshadow palette. What makes it so special, besides the fact that it is one of the most beautiful, luxurious looking cardboard palettes, is that it is 100% recyclable. So unfortunately, you don't get a mirror. But if you wanted to, when you finish playing around with this palette, you can pop out the little eyeshadow plate and you can throw this directly in the recycling. I don't know how many people who pick this up are going to recycle it when they're done or how long that will take, but I love the idea behind the concept. The mission of sustainability in beauty is very important, so I like to see brands coming up with unique ideas. This is, I think, the first of its kind. I haven't heard of other brands doing this. If they're out there, let me know. But besides all that, the shadows are really fun. I've played around with this a lot off camera. I haven't done any tutorials yet. Perhaps I'll come up with something for the holidays, but I love it. My only complaint, and it's very nitpicky, is I wish there was a darker shade, because I always have to reach for something else to add a lot of depth and dimension in the outer V. Other than that, it's beautiful, and you have some really fun shades. Some of these duochrome shadows down here remind me a lot of Pat McGrath Labs at a fraction of the cost, but they perform just as beautifully. It is a really soft and creamy formula. The texture is really impressive. The next two eyeshadow palettes I have here to share are both from Natasha Denona. So here I have the Love palette from spring and the Bronze palette from summer. And if I had to put these in order, it really comes down to preference because you know her formula is basically the same in both. I would rank this one a little bit lower simply because I don't really grab these shades as often as I do the warm tones in the Bronze palette. But I love these colors. This was the gateway palette that led to several other Natasha Denona purchases. I only wish that she had included maybe a few neutral tones. Not necessarily neutral and really warm like the Bronze palette, but if there was some other light brown color, like this first shade right here, ends up looking really peachy pink on the eye. If that was maybe a light tan, I think I would probably grab this more than I do. But I love the mattes, I love the metallics. As an introductory palette, I think this was perfect. And this was before the influx of pink palettes. This was really one of the first. So at this point, I don't think anybody was really sick of them yet. And then the Bronze eyeshadow palette from summer. This was the perfect summer palette. And it's also very fall. very warm and seductive. It's a very moody palette because you have a lot of deeper tones. I think this is perfect for creating warm, smoky eyes, smoldering eyeshadow looks. A lot of different metallics in here, and they're all really beautiful. The reason this palette is further down, and it's not that it's further down, I will reiterate for the millionth time, I like all of these palettes, but you can see by looking at it, it's kind of one-dimensional. It's a very monochrome, a lot of very similar shades. You don't have a ton of variety here, and I understand that that's really the point. It is the bronze palette because you're going to create bronze looks, and that's it. I think most of the looks you're going to come up with are going to look kind of the same. Not a complaint against the palette, just a justification for why I moved it down the list, because the texture is amazing. I usually live in these colors, so this palette was really made for me. It was a no-brainer to purchase this, and I have no regrets. We have now entered top 5 category. These are the top 5 large eyeshadow palettes for 2020, and I'm hoping that you guys will share your list with me down below. You don't have to rank all of your eyeshadow palettes if you don't want to. I don't want to create that stress and mess in your household. But if you have a top 5 list or a top 3 list of your favorite larger eyeshadow palettes, drop me a comment. I would love to hear from you guys. So palette number 5 is from Charlotte Tilbury. It's the Bejeweled Eyes to Hypnotize palette. I absolutely love this eyeshadow palette. I love her formula, her texture from these palettes. They're just really nice. I love the packaging that she came out with. I'm kind of happy that I skipped the blue palette from last year because it had that one green eyeshadow. It was still a really pretty palette. I just don't think I need to collect it every single year. I want to make sure that it's something that I will actually use, that I actually really love. And the shades inside of the palette this time around just speak to me a little bit more than last year. My only complaint about the palette is that it's a little bit discombobulated. I don't know. I look at it and it doesn't really make sense. I almost wish she had moved Seduce Glow down to where Love Glow is. That way you had all of these warm browns and then the pink and purple trio could be next to each other, because it just seems sort of odd. I really love that there are so many metallics in this palette, because the other Charlotte Tilbury palette I picked up this year is the Pillow Talk, which is mostly matte, a sprinkling of metallics. This one's kind of the opposite. It's mostly metallics with a sprinkling of mattes, which is perfect for the holidays when you want really shimmery, sparkly eyes. Coming in at number 4 is the Divine Rose 2 eyeshadow palette. And I picked this up as a bundle with the original Divine Rose, but when I googled it, it looks like Divine Rose came out around November of 2019, so that is not included on the list, even though it is a newer palette for me this year. I love this palette. Even though I don't grab it that much, I think as far as palettes go, this packaging is the best. Out of all of my palettes, I would rank this number 1 packaging wise. I love how heavy and substantial they feel. It's like a brick. And then when you open it up, I love her texture. I really like her shimmery colors. I really like her mattes. But it's bright and bold and fun, and you can create so many evening party looks using this palette. It's not going to be your everyday palette. You're not going to get a ton of use out of this, which actually, that's probably the only reason I haven't grabbed this more, because we really aren't going to dinner nearly as much this year as we would have in years past. Going forward, maybe that'll change, hopefully soon, fingers crossed, and then I will be pulling this out again. But I always think her palettes are so great, her Mothership palettes are so great, because there's always something that's very interesting. Like this shade right here is so unique. You're not going to find that in a lot of other palettes. This shade is really amazing. I think palette number 3 is going to surprise some people. I'm surprised, and I'm the one who ranked them. But this is from Bobbi Brown. This was sent to me. This is the High Bar eyeshadow palette that they came out with as part of their holiday collection. And I've only used this once on camera. I'm planning to do another tutorial using this palette because since I did that look, the original look, I've played around with this so much almost every single day. I just cannot get enough of this palette, and I've created a couple go-to looks that I've been using consistently in a lot of my videos. I think this is just ideal for me. This color story, the texture, the formula is amazing, but these colors, this is exactly what I want in an eyeshadow palette. Because you can do everyday, neutral, natural, easy looks. You have plenty of nice neutral mattes, but then you have these really pretty shimmer shades that are so beautiful for the holidays. Every time I use this, I love the look. And these are some of the most blendable, easy to work with eyeshadows I have ever tried from any brand. I don't know what they did, but it's amazing because I have used Bobbi Brown eyeshadows. I used them a lot actually on clients when I was a beauty stylist. I always liked them, but I was never really obsessed with them. I never purchased them for myself. I'm so happy they sent this over because I really would not have gone out of my way to pick this up, and then I would have missed out on what is my third favorite eyeshadow palette of the entire year. My second favorite eyeshadow palette that launched in 2020 is the Natasha Denona Glam palette. I absolutely love this palette. This is so chic, so sophisticated. I've been obsessed with every look that I've done with this palette. And as far as neutral palettes are concerned, this is up there with best of the best. It has everything. It has light shades, medium shades, deep shades, metallics, mattes, everything you need. This kind of took me by surprise. I was very happy with it when I first started playing around with it, but it wasn't until later on that I said, okay, I need to get some use out of this. I'm buying all of these eyeshadow palettes, and instead of just moving on to the next thing, I'm going to stick with this. The texture and formula is just like the Love palette and the Bronze palette. It's really amazing. It's just this color story I find to be so flattering. I don't own any other palette that looks like this. Thank goodness she priced it at $65 and not that outrageous $120 price point or whatever it is, that Trio Chrome palette that was so expensive, like her Biba palette. Oh no, I'm not sure I would have purchased this at that price because these aren't the colors that I'm used to wearing. So it was priced perfectly. It's the perfect palette. I've become obsessed with it. I cannot recommend it enough. And it really is just glamorous. Everything about it I think is so sleek, chic. The looks you can create with this are very sophisticated, very elevated. I think this would be perfect for holiday, for an evening out. If we were getting dressed up and going to a holiday party this year, this would have been the palette that I would grab. Makes me sad. My number one eyeshadow palette for all of 2020 is the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Instant Eye Palette. I did not have a choice. I really didn't. I have used this palette definitely every week, almost every single day. So it just wouldn't have been right. It would have been a complete lie had I picked any other palette for the number one spot. I just use this all the time. Anytime I have to pull in an additional palette to get the look to be perfect, it's this palette that I grab because I really go into this shade a lot. And I don't know how I have yet to hit pan on any of these shades, but I think that really says something about this palette. How much I use it, how long it is lasting me. I even contemplated at some point there was a big sale and I thought, oh, I wonder if I should get another one because it's such a great price. I stopped myself because that would have been insane considering all of the eyeshadow palettes I just showed you. But that's how much I love this. I just don't really want to be without it. About this palette, when I look at this palette compared to the other Charlotte Tilbury palette, I might as well show you since I made a point to point it out. This looks perfect. The shades are in the exact order they should be in. It doesn't look discombobulated. It visually makes sense. Do you see? This palette just looks a little bit funny compared to this palette. If you did not pick this up and you love these shades, I recommend it. I think this was supposed to be limited and maybe they brought it back. Maybe now they decided it's not limited. I hope it's not. I hope this is something that she always keeps around because this should be a Charlotte Tilbury staple. It is definitely one of the best products from Charlotte Tilbury ever. You made it to the end. We have arrived at our final destination. So that is my complete collection of large eyeshadow palettes from this year. It's fun to look back and see how much makeup was launched just this year, a lot of iconic palettes came out this year. Some standouts for sure. I'm now staring at a pile of smaller palettes, so that will be a video that I'm working on very soon. But that completes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Leave me your comments, questions down below. I want to hear from you guys. Share your list, your top 5 list, top 3 list. If you want to rank all of your palettes, go for it. I would love to hear from you guys. I always read every comment, even if I can't always respond to everybody. I see you and I appreciate you. As always, I will be linking everything mentioned, everything on my face down below in the description box for your convenience. And for more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.